Well, welcome everybody. I gather we're on air now. Welcome. I hope that we are anyway. We've got people logging in from all around the state, and in fact, some in the mainland too today, which is terrific. And look, it's great to have another one in our series of great Deloitte presentations and webinar in our webinar series. But first, I'd like to begin by acknowledging the traditional custodians of the land that we're meeting on today, right around Tasmania, and pay respects to the leaders past, present and emerging. And look, what a session we've got set up for today. Cybersecurity trends is really something we should all be very much aware of. And we've all heard of the big stories around Tasmania in the last few years about cyber attacks. The federal group come to mind. I was talking to their CEO earlier in the week, who was saying that 12 months later, it's still costing them millions. They still haven't been able to recover all of their files. They haven't been able to open up all of their systems and had to rebuild from scratch. But, right down to the very little ones. Again, we all heard the story of the lady that lost her deposit going towards buying her house because her emails were intercepted and some account numbers were changed and her deposit went to a hacker rather than going to the builder that was going to build her home. Look, this is the domain of all businesses in Tasmania now. It's not just big businesses that are being attacked by hackers, and it is not just, again, some little people-faced kid in the basement of their house somewhere in the world. This is commercial hacking, by commercial organisations who are trying to get access to your funds and to your information and to, at times, your whole personal profiles. So we can't have a better group of people to talk about this today than the team at Deloitte, and it gives me great pleasure to pass across to, we've got, again, experts in the field. We've got Emma, we've got Michael. We're going to talk in more detail about what is one of the most important things to be aware of with your business. So enjoy what's going to be a terrific session. I know that I will. Thanks so much for joining too.
Thanks, Michael, and hi, everyone.
Great. Thank you, Michael, and hello, everyone. Thank you for joining us today. It's a pleasure to have so many people involved in this webinar, so looking forward to getting stuck into it. So just by way of introduction, I guess I wanted to run through just a bit about Deloitte in the Tasmanian market and the role that we play sort of in this cyberspace as well. So just for your understanding, at Deloitte, Tasmania's risk advisory practice is across both Hobart and Launceston offices, and we collaborate with our cyber risk specialists all across Australia as well. So that's, the best of the best within the Deloitte network. And it is an area that is obviously growing in terms of people's awareness and also, just the size of teams and the type of work that's sort of happening in that space as well. So for this session, we're going to cover current and emerging trends. We're going to talk about some key changes in cyber risk management, and we're also going to run through some of the key questions that you should be asking yourselves regarding cyber security as well. I think it's important to call out too that cyber maturity is different for every organisation and is not a static measure. So it's cyber threats are constantly evolving, and so too should organisations be. So no matter where you are, there are simple steps that you can take to improve your organisation's readiness to prevent against a cyber attack. So as mentioned, I'm Emma Archer. I'm a manager in the Deloitte Tasmania business in the risk advisory space, and I've got my colleague Michael here as well. So I'll throw to Michael for a quick hello.
Hey, Michael Puckridge, principal. I'm in the South Australian Deloitte office. I've been working in cybersecurity for, giving away my age, but over 25 years, mainly working with the defence and intelligence agencies, governments all around the world, and also private institutions. But also seem to be the go-to guy within my family and friends, networks and neighbours whenever they have cyber problems as well. So I get a perspective of what's happening at the big end of town, but also for individuals and the sorts of things they're facing in there. And I guess the thing that you learn over time is that the same protections that you apply at those very large institution levels are the same sorts of things that you need to do as individuals, and we'll go through some of these as part of the presentation.
Great, Thanks, Michael. So in terms of what we're sort of going to cover this morning in this session, it's quite a jam-packed agenda. So there's a lot to sort of include in this session today. There's a lot that, you know, we couldn't include due to time. So in the interest of, I guess, making sure that we deliver all the appropriate information, we do have opportunity for questions at the end, or you can drop your questions into the chat box as well. So bear that in mind, there'll be an opportunity to ask questions sort of once we get through the content, or there's the chat function as well. So as mentioned, we'll cover evolving threats and challenges. We're going to look at changes in cyber risk management and also some considerations for your organisation as well. So without further ado, I will throw to Michael for a bit of a discussion around evolving threats and challenges.
Yeah, thank you. So you all hear the news and you know, constantly hearing about cyber attacks and things like that, and you know, probably heightened now, especially with events in the Ukraine and the geopolitical instability that we're seeing at the moment. So the sorts of trends that we're seeing, every 14 seconds we're seeing organisations fall victim to ransomware, and this is where systems get locked and you're asked to pay a fee to get them unlocked. Just to highlight here too, I think the statistics around that show, even if you do pay the ransomware, that only about 22% of the systems actually get unlocked. So, you know, you need to be very wary about paying those sorts of things. The global shipping company Maersk, and this is a very publicised case that actually Deloitte helped them recover. It took 7 minutes for their entire systems to be locked globally with a NotPetya virus that locked their systems up, and that was incredible. I mean, it literally stopped a global shipping company from running all their systems, and you know, and you were seeing things like the, you know, docks in New York with, you know, trucks piled up and not being able to be processed and things there, and that was repeated across the world. Some really interesting articles on that one too about how Deloitte helped them recover those systems. Something to be really wary of in these times is the increased risk to your supply chain. So it's not just your own companies to be looking out for and making sure that they're protected, but also getting assurances from your supply chain that they're also doing the good hygiene of cybersecurity around their systems. And last year there was expected to be a 4-time increase in attacks on the supply chain, and we've certainly seen that happening and increasing rapidly. We'll talk a bit later about some of the initiatives from the federal government and what's called the SOCI Act, and that's Security of Critical Infrastructure. If you are a supply chain member yourselves of any critical infrastructure organisations, there will be some flow-on effects and expectations of security to your organisations as a result of the nation trying to protect our critical infrastructure. Interestingly, 90% of attacks begin via phishing or what we call social engineering attacks. So it does involve individuals. So the bulk of attacks begin at humans. So we need to be very aware of education and helping people understand their role as individuals in our organisations in preventing these attacks. Some of the broader trends that we're seeing is that, you know, the attacks are becoming less individual hackers and the guys you typically see on TV with hoodies in dark rooms, and a lot of the attacks that are now occurring are actually being driven by artificial intelligence and machine learning backed systems. So a lot of them are sort of running in the background and looking for weaknesses to overcome. We're also seeing systems being hacked to run cryptocurrency mining operations on them and using up your valuable processing and computer resources to run those. We're certainly seeing a lot more state-sponsored attacks, and we'll talk about a couple of instances of those in just a minute. We've mentioned supply chain there. Another thing, and particularly important, I think, in Tasmania, and we've just been through a security maturity review for one of your largest export companies, and the Internet of Things and devices that are connected are also attack vectors for attackers. So these are things like, switches and water pumps and temperature gauges, those sorts of things are also more increasingly being targeted. And we're also seeing those as targets for things like the mining sector and also utilities and electricity and things like that. Thanks, Emma. So the types of threats that we're seeing, the biggest ones are exploitation of existing vulnerabilities in software and systems. And it's really important to have yourselves or your IT teams regularly updating all your software and platforms, because these become open for people to attack as vulnerabilities are found. Phishing attacks are certainly the most common cyber incidents that we're seeing at the moment, and also the Australian Government Cyber Security Centre seeing the same things there as well, and related to that is ransomware as well. Just some examples. So some Australian organisations such as Toll and BlueScope have had some very public attacks on them and bringing down systems for a number of months. So Toll was taken out for about 9 months on a lot of their major systems. BlueScope halted their production of steel because of attacks on their systems in 2020. More of a global attack was a security software solution called SolarWinds, and it also meant that even US government agencies and their email systems were compromised as part of that one, and that was a really sophisticated international attack. And this year the stories just keep happening. We've seen Microsoft, Samsung, Okta, News Corp, their journalists had email systems hacked, and their research and sources information hacked by what was believed to be the Chinese government. Toyota have had to suspend production of certain plants because of supply chain hacks, and we've also seen broadband systems in Europe being brought down by hacks on even the satellite systems that we have in the sky. So the challenge for our teams as cyber professionals, and we've got about 17,000 people in the Deloitte cyber team globally, is just the increasing and changing nature of the attacks that we're seeing. And if your sons and daughters are wanting an interesting career that's constantly changing and challenging, cyber is certainly a good prospect for them to go into. Under the Australian government's mandatory reporting for data breaches, and this affects certain sizes and types of organisations. Last year we saw an increase of 6% over the mandatory notifications. We've seen from those reports, 55% of those are through malicious or criminal attack. And other data breaches have occurred through human error. So again, education is so important to staff to help protect systems, and other breaches have occurred around system faults as well there. So these are some of the results that we're seeing from the government's mandatory reporting schemes. All right, next slide. So we're also seeing a trend of it's not just the big end of town and military and government and banks and things like that that are being targeted by attackers. And, I'm even getting calls from, some of our team around individual investors that are having their, ATO accounts hacked, their banking accounts, their emails, their trading accounts all being hacked, and we are seeing that happening more and more at the individual level now, and the tools are becoming increasingly sophisticated. So we run a lot of training and awareness ourselves for our teams to keep on top of these things so that they can protect systems against these more targeted attacks. And this really is big business, and we'll talk, some of those last attacks that we talked about Microsoft and Samsung and others, very, very, very well organized groups of individuals that are well financed, and we're seeing them making tens of millions of dollars a year from the hacks that they're doing. Next slide, thanks. So for organizations, the challenges that we continue to see and are becoming more prevalent challenges are, because people have had to change to remote working, that's opened up a whole range of different attacks to systems where often you're having workers come into your network remotely, and opening up other doorways, I guess, for people to come into systems. I can't emphasize enough maintenance on systems and updates that, often you'll see organizations, putting in bits of machinery that contact the internet and report on, their operations and things like that. Or we're still seeing organizations running, Windows 7, Windows 8, old legacy versions of software and all different applications, and how important it is to maintain and keep those up to date. It's really important for organizations to also identify what are the crown jewels that you're protecting, what are the most important assets in your organization that require the strongest controls. So make sure you're thinking yourselves about, what if I lost would really impact my business. It's not just we talk about incident response and people being hacked, and I often say to people, well, your first assumption should be that your systems are already been compromised and there are potentially people in them. What we also recommend is that people practice their incident responses. So what happens if you have a ransomware attack and it locks your systems? Have you practiced what you might do to recover and to test those controls and backups and recoveries that you've had in place? We recently had the example of a really major utilities company lose all their corporate systems, and they couldn't recover them because even the backup service itself had been encrypted. So they had to go through an exercise of trying to recover files from scraps of information that they had, but also building new systems in parallel to try and get their systems up and running. More and more too, we're seeing regulatory compliance coming into play, and we'll talk a little bit more about that with the SOCI Act in just a minute. But big on everybody's list should be awareness that your employees, your own staff, are the biggest risks to your systems, as we've seen those numbers on phishing and ransomware attacks. And just to highlight that what we're seeing is, ransomware cost, around about 1.85 billion in 2021, and that the estimated cost per incident of recovery is around about 1.85 million US dollars. That the cost of recovery, don't underestimate that if your systems are offline for weeks at a time, that you're having to recover them and rebuild them, what is the cost and flow-on effect of that? Next slide.
Great. So I guess, Michael, that kind of leads into this whole idea too that, we're not immune in Tasmania. So this is something that is more prevalent and hitting our sort of state as well. So as sort of TCCI Michael mentioned earlier that, we had the Rest Point Casino, which was part of the federal group that was attacked last year. So that sort of shut down all their gaming machines, hotel booking systems for sort of weeks where they were sort of impacted for that. So they chose not to pay the ransom for this, but as mentioned, that even paying the ransom might not necessarily mean that they would have got the systems back and they'd become potentially a target as well. So, I mean, the cost of this attack, the recovery and also the ongoing costs of that has sort of been estimated in the several million for this particular organisation. So that's something that is, recent, relevant as well, that caused huge disruption to that particular business. And we've got the meat processor as well. So Michael's just going to have a talk to JBS.
Yeah, so this one was interesting and also quite interesting seeing the Four Corners report on JBS in the last week. But this attack took down Tasmanian parts of their organisation. So it just goes to show that a multinational can have local impact when their systems are hacked. This took out about a third of the meat supply in the US for about a week as well. So it's for the food and critical infrastructure pieces, this was quite an important one. They actually ended up paying their ransomware, and they paid $11 million to recover those systems. But as was mentioned, that's not a guarantee that you'll actually get those systems back. And rather than going down that course, preparation and protection for your systems is very much recommended.
Cool. The other examples we had last year, the Burnie City Council, they sort of released a statement that they had been targeted by a cyber sort of incident. So they were investigating that one. So they identified some unusual activity, which was unauthorised access on their accounts. So they had, as a result of that, systems that they sort of had to take offline. They then had to deal with a lot of backlog as well. So you can imagine sort of coming back online, you're not just, back to business as usual. You've got this backlog that you're sort of working through as well. And they've had to implement a number of additional security measures to make sure that, they're better protected in this space as well. So that sort of hit them quite hard. As well, and there was no, from what I sort of understand, there was no demand for money either. So it's not just money that sometimes these hackers are after. It might be information. It might be just sort of maybe testing a new product. There's not one clear reason for why people sort of do this as well. So it's important to call out. The other sort of one, which, I think Michael and I discussed was quite appalling, is around Cadbury. So
that's the most heinous crime I've ever seen. Production of chocolate halting that goes straight to my stomach.
So this was Mondelez, who's their parent. They were targeted by a global cyber attack. So this impacted our Cadbury factory in Hobart. So the perpetrators in this instance were demanding money. So their computer systems were locked down with a request for payment, I think it was by Bitcoin. So it sort of took them offline. It affected their production at the Cadbury factory. So they had to cease production because a lot of that is sort of automated and on, computer systems while they dealt with that outage. So they had a lot of staff that were sort of on cleaning duties while they worked through and got those systems back online as well. So although it was sort of the parent that was targeted, obviously Cadbury having a presence in Tasmania was affected as well. So that means that, production can't happen while those systems are down. Cool. And Michael, there's another one around the Tasmanian emergency services.
This is an interesting one where police employee accounts were accessed over 800 times in a 12-month period. But also interesting to see from the report on this attack was it wasn't just email and information systems. It's things like CCTV cameras. So other people tapping in and seeing what's happening on those systems. So this is quite a scary one if you think about the opportunity for organised crime and what they could do in getting into police systems there as well. The other piece, obviously everyone was hit by the internet and mobile services outages in Tasmania, and although that was through someone doing something silly with the cables, just highlights the vulnerability of the connectivity. What happens if someone had a major attack on the network to Tasmania and took that system out for several days at a time? What would be that effect on your business, and to consider what sort of redundancies you might need to look at if those things did happen to the networks to the state.
Yep, perfect. And we all lived through that one. It wasn't ideal, no internet, no Netflix or anything until that was back online. So okay, so next we're going to have a chat to you about some changes in sort of the cyber risk management space. So I will throw to Michael again for this one.
Yeah. And look, I won't dwell on this because I know we're tight for time, but the main thing to take away from this side is that, if I look back, 5-10 years ago, cyber was the domain of the IT group and, those proud nerds in the basement. But very much today, this is a management and board concern and issue. And I think, as part of broader risk reviews for everyone's businesses, this needs to, and what we see is becoming more elevated, that we do see people on the executives and boards that have cyber risk as part of the issues that they're looking at on a day-to-day basis. And we've certainly made recommendations to local organisations to elevate cyber from maybe a side role for an individual in the IT group to actually a dedicated role for cyber, because it's becoming such a critical piece to anyone's business. And a couple of just a couple of things to note here. There's a few regulations to be aware of. There's a new act and amendments from the federal government, which is the Security of Critical Infrastructure Act, and that affects things like utilities, financial sector, energy, even universities and the food supply chain and others. And really, if your organisation is a supplier or part of the critical infrastructure, this will have some flow-on effects around risk and making sure that you're understanding cyber-related risks and managing that. But it also has mandatory reporting requirements, and even down to, if certain events happen, that the federal government reserve the right to come in and help fix the problems that they're seeing there as well. So really important. If you are a supplier to any of I think there's now something like 22 different categories of critical infrastructure. If you're a supplier to any of those, you're likely to see in the near future flow-on requirements to meet certain security controls. So that's something to be very aware of as well. Also, the Privacy Act and the data breach notifications, that if you're a certain size organisation, you do have mandatory requirements that if personal information has been breached as part of an attack, that you do need to notify the federal government and the Office of the Information Commissioner about those breaches. So make sure you're aware of and maybe have a look at some of the good online information about these pieces. Next slide. So we've touched on this from the security of critical infrastructure pieces, and very, very important to look at those things. And that to me is really good that the federal government's recognising that there are businesses and supply chain pieces that are critical to keeping a country running and our economy running and things there as well. And to me, this is not overbearing in terms of the requirements to do risk reviews and to report things to the government so that they can then assist. But also I think, you know, we've really seen a trend of change within the Australian government, and you know, the spooks are coming out of their dark crevices, and I say that because the Australian Cyber Security Centre has come out of the Australian Signals Directorate, which has typically been a secretive organisation that's looked at, you know, securing our nation and the information of our nation. But now they've got a public face in the ACSC that is really helping individuals, small to medium businesses and large organisations to look at the threats and look at the statistically proven methods that can be used to stop attacks. So Emma, I think you've got a screen there. So this is a website I would bookmark. It's cyber.gov.au. It's from the Australian Cyber Security Centre, and really useful information here to help protect yourselves and your organisations. If you could scroll back up to the top, I just want to show a couple of things here. So small and medium businesses, there's a couple of pieces here on step-by-step guides and protecting your business online. And this has some really useful guides to step you through, and your cyber staff or IT staff, how to protect your organisations and systems. And there's something here called the Essential 8, which is if you do these 8 different things, you're more likely to protect your networks than any of the other controls statistically that they list as well. So very much recommend spending some time having a look at this site, and you know, making yourselves familiar with it as well. And there are alerts and other pieces that you can get from this as well. So you know, here's some stuff on antivirus, backing up, web security, email and text, you know, how to securely share files, why multi-factor authentication is important, and you're seeing more and more of online services offering that as well. So a really, really, really useful starting point if you're unfamiliar with cyber and controls, that this really does help you as a business, no matter what size you are, or as an individual and families, and helping the individual I mentioned in getting control back of their systems. It was a lot of the individual information on here that we referred them to help get them back up and take controls of the systems they lost controls of as well. And next slide.
Okay, so we're going to jump now into some considerations for your organisation or your business, or even yourself as well. So we'll run through a few areas in this. So Michael. Yeah,
so as you know, owners, managers of organisations, as board members, there are critical systems that you should be asking of your own organisation. So is cybersecurity embedded in your business? Who's responsible for it? How's it being implemented, and how is it being practiced? What are the crown jewels of your organisation? What do you need to protect most? Is it, you know, a patent and information you have? Is it a process? Is it you know, your emails, and is it your pricing information? Is it your you know, your CRM system and others there as well? So identifying those critical systems helps you target the controls to their best effort as well. What is your cyber risk management setup? How are you identifying? And you know, cyber risk isn't something that's okay, we'll do a risk review every 2 years, leave it on the shelf and come back to it in another 2 years' time. It is actually something that should be on your regular reviews with your executives and boards and things like that, because we're struggling to keep up with the changes, and the landscape is changing every minute of every day. So the risks and the risk profiles are changing rapidly. So make sure you're keeping it as part of your risk management strategy. How are you protecting your supply chain? Who makes your packaging? Who's your logistics companies? Who's your online suppliers of systems? And what protections do they have in place? So don't be afraid to ask them, for details of how they're protecting their systems. But also we're telling our clients to be more proactive in defining the security controls that you expect of your supply chain as well. Do you have the right skills in your organization? And I realize this is a hard one for small to medium organizations. Find if you can't afford to have someone on staff doing these things, is there a trusted supplier of cyber services that you can work with? And there are lots of great organizations in Tasmania that can help with those things as well. And taking it to the next level, what if the worst happens? So are you ready for the worst happening? Are you practiced? Have you tested your controls? Have you tested that you can recover your data and systems? And what would it take to do that? So making sure that you are not just ticking the boxes, that you've done the controls and crossed off the risks and things like that, but are you actually practiced in recovering systems is a really important one there.
Great. And in addition to those questions to sort of ask of management or yourself, there are also some, questions to ask, whether I've called it your IT guru, it might be yourself, it might be a team that you've got. So whoever sort of is responsible for your IT, then these are really important questions that need to be asked as well. So those questions are: who has responsibility for organisation-wide cybersecurity preparedness? So this is, as Michael mentioned, it's an everyone problem. It's not just IT. So how are we making sure that the whole organisation, has a lens on cybersecurity? Do you understand your cyber maturity at any point in time as well? So that is, are we keeping track of sort of certain trends that are happening? Do we know what's happening in our particular sector? Do we know what's happening external but also internal to our organisation? How are we aware of our maturity in terms of our systems as well, and sort of what's happening in our space? Do you know your most critical data and systems and where they are located and how they are secured? So again, Michael's sort of called this out. So, that critical data and systems, what are they? It could be your, the systems that hold your processes for producing a product. It also could be customer data. So data is something that is, that attacks can sometimes target as well. So that customer data can be worth money. So it might not be that, people are after funds in particular, but data is important as well in these attacks. Are you monitoring and analysing activity on your most critical systems? Do you know if there has been unauthorised access? Would you know if somebody sort of got into your system and, played around in there for a certain period of time? How are you monitoring what's happening in your critical systems? Do we have a comprehensive written breach response plan in place? So in the event that we do have a cyber attack, do we have something written down? Do we know what we'd need to do if there were an incident? A lot easier to have something prepared and written than to try and flounder around when it actually happens and sort of work through the issue in the moment. Do you know where to go for more information or help? So Michael's obviously referred us to the cyber website, cyber.gov.au, which is a great tool for everyone to sort of engage with. So where do you go for help if you have certain questions? Do you have a trusted advisor that you can talk with? Do you know which websites are going to be useful and valuable to you? Do we have effective training and awareness that informs employees on cybersecurity? So again, tying into that organisation-wide sort of lens, you know, is everyone aware of their obligations as an employee of your business in regards to cybersecurity? So, you know, simple things like phishing emails, do they know what to look out for? You know, are they conscious that they're not sort of clicking on those potentially malicious links as well? And do they know the current trends as well and what's happening in the cyberspace? And finally, have we thought about which cyber risks are to be avoided, accepted, mitigated, or transferred through insurance? So that's sitting down and thinking about what are those risks and how are we going to deal with them as well. So there's a few really critical questions to sort of put the IT lens on, as well as sort of those previous questions around management lens as well. Great. So that is a lot of information for everyone. But basically, I think it's really important to call out that it is, you know, the world of cyber is constantly evolving. It's important that we don't become complacent. Unfortunately, we're always going to need to stay ahead of the trends and risks that are sort of in this space. So it's not, you know, you've sort of set up a plan, you're done and dusted, move on. It's a constantly sort of changing space, which can be scary, but there is help available. So there are resources that are available to support you and your business and your organisation. So it's really important that you sort of think about where you are, what is your, like, really think about where are you in terms of your cyber maturity journey, and where do you need to be, and what are those next steps that you need to take to sort of incrementally improve your own situation, your own environment, to work towards a better, you know, to help improve your readiness basically and help prevent a cyber attack. So that's sort of, you know, I think the takeaway from this is what do you need to do today, tomorrow, you know, to create a better environment for yourself.
And a really good point there, because no organisation can do this all at once, and it is a maturity thing for the organisation. Is okay, well, let's look at the basics, let's look at the assets, let's look at the controls we need over them, let's, you know, look at monitoring, let's you know, look at incident response and things like that. It's a progressive things for any organization we meet, even, you know, the defense and other organizations. A lot of the parts of those organizations are you know, don't tell the rest of the world, but relatively immature in some parts. So you're not alone in, if you are on the lower end of preparedness. It really is look at those, you know, cyber.gov.au assets and look at what are some of those starting points that I can do to protect my systems.
Great. Do we have any questions from anyone? I'm just going to stop sharing my screen. Okay. Drop them in the chat or yell them out.
Yeah, I've got a question. With so many attacks targeting our core, you know, frontline people, either via phishing or social engineering, what are some of the training that you guys use at Deloitte, Michael? Is it sort of more computer based, or are you training your staff sort of one-on-one in sessions? Like, how are you sort of tackling that?
Yeah, it's a mix of both. So we run, there's mandatory training in our organisation that's quite regular. So it's not just a one-off. It tends to happen every 6 months, and because of the changing nature of the the types of emails and how professional we're seeing some of those come in, and you're seeing, you know, things more targeted that, you know, it's a personal name in it. It's got your CEO's name on there saying, I'm, you know, could you log in and do this for me urgently, kind of stuff. So you are seeing those more what we call spear phishing attacks happening. So there are lots of good sources of online sessions for those, and also little tests and things like that, just to check that, you know, people have been awake during those sessions and have actually understood the implications of what they're seeing too. But we also do run personal updates for people as well internally ourselves, and it's a constant thing that we're having to do both of those. And taking that to the next level as well, there's some of us with, you know, things like defence clearances, and those systems are even stricter on mandating that ongoing training and awareness as well.
Great, thank you.
Thanks, James.
Great. I can't see anyone else coming off mute or any more questions in the chat. So if you do think of anything, feel free to reach out. And if you've got any, questions, or you sort of want to chat about anything as well, feel free to get in touch too. So we're happy to sort of talk through any concerns that you have as well. But yeah, it can be a scary, scary space, but there are things that you can do to help protect yourself as well. So thanks so much again, everyone, for joining. It's sort of a lot to digest, but it's been great to have you all on the line as well.
Nice to meet you all. Thank you.
Thank you. See ya.